sell-off continuing with the Dow down 1.5%, 267 points. The S&P staying below that 2,000 mark. Will it close below that level? That's the crucial question. Down 1.8% now, and the Nasdaq down 2.4%. For more on the Nasdaq in particular, let's bring in Abigail Doolittle from Midtown Manhattan.
Hi, Vani. Well, after having its worst one-day slide on Friday since August of 2011, we are looking at another sharp slide or sell-off for the Nasdaq today, down 2.4%, somewhat off the lows. Nonetheless, we are looking at the index's worst two-day slump since August of last year. Now, similar to Friday, the biggest drag from a sector standpoint on the Nasdaq, technology. This includes Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook. From a percentage standpoint, one of the worst performers in the Nasdaq 100, NXP Semiconductor. This as Bank of America Merrill Lynch has downgraded the shares to a neutral from a buy, along with two other chip stocks, with analyst Vivek Arya citing the Brexit woes and, quote, summer blues. Now, he prefers Avago, NVIDIA, and Intel on those, the exposure to the cloud and the consumer for those companies, but as we can see, all in the red. So we're still looking at another broad-based sell-off here. From a macro standpoint, Jonathan Krinsky at MKM Partners, in fact, says that on today's weakness, technical damage has been done, and we see this in a two-year chart with the Nasdaq dropping below a key level that he calls 4,700. He sees more near-term downside, perhaps to the recent lows, but within a longer-term range. Vani?
Abigail, thanks. We'll check in with you again later on. Let's check in on the Bloomberg First Word News this morning. Courtney Collins has more from our New York newsroom. Courtney.
Thank you, Vani. It's the first Supreme Court decision on abortion in almost a decade. The court struck down a Texas law that had threatened to close 3/4 of the state's abortion clinics. The vote was 5-3. Texas said its requirements for doctors and facilities were designed to protect patients. Opponents said they were aimed at reducing access to abortion. British Prime Minister David Cameron is rejecting calls for a do-over vote on leaving the European Union. Cameron's setting up a new office to deal with the British exit, and he told Parliament the economy is in for some turmoil.
Turning to our economy, it's clear that markets are volatile. There are some companies considering their investments, and we know this is going to be far from plain sailing. However, we should take confidence from the fact that Britain is ready to confront what the future holds for us from a position of strength.
Cameron says he will leave office in October once his replacement is chosen. In Spain, voters surprised the pollsters in the country's second general election in 6 months. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy consolidated his position. Rajoy's People's Party had been expected to lose seats in Parliament. Instead, it picked up more. Results suggest that voters bought into Rajoy's call not to jeopardize Spain's economic recovery. And a Singapore Airlines jet caught fire while landing in Singapore today. The plane was returning after aborting a flight to Italy because of an engine oil warning message. All 241 passengers and crew on the Boeing 777 were evacuated safely. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by our more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Courtney Collins. This is Bloomberg. Vani?
Courtney, thanks. All right, the UK's vote to leave the EU is still sending shockwaves across global markets. Our next guest says his main concern is that this is not a one and done, and other countries may follow Britain's lead. Wasif Latif is head of global multi-assets at USAA, and he joins us now from San Antonio, Texas. Wasif, thank you. You say this may not be a one and done event. Rate for us the probability of whether more countries will agitate to leave the European Union area, or that integration will actually get stronger after this.
Vani, the agitation, I think, will continue from here on as the aftermath or the aftershocks of what happened on Friday continue to unfold. The voices in the other countries, such as Italy and France, for example, are asking for a similar type of vote. So there is concern around that, but we think that ultimately those may not go through because the European Union will try to put everybody together and unite people and try to make it so that this type of referendum doesn't occur in those other countries. So that may have...
That is the open question. We're waiting for answers on that. So in terms of U.S. assets then, the sell-off hasn't been quite as strong as it has in Europe and in Britain in particular. What do you do? Do you wait it out? Do you go to cash?
Well, the coming days and weeks will continue to have some volatility tied to it. Our view is that this is not a Lehman type of an event. This is more of a Bear Stearns type of an event where we've had something occur that is unprecedented. It wasn't expected by the markets, as we all know, and we're dealing with the repercussions of it. So there'll be some volatility going into this through the coming weeks. And we don't want to be taking big bites out of the market at this point, but we are looking at opportunities and nibbling at some. There are certain parts of the global market that are attractive on a valuation basis, such as emerging markets. Now, they are still fraught with issues around global growth, but we still think that there's some opportunity there going forward on the longer term basis, simply on the valuation and the fundamentals. And Europe, yes, it does have a lot of problems right now, but valuation-wise, it is cheaper to the U.S. We think that globally, when you look at the markets, equity markets, the U.S. market is the most richest and the one to be the most cautious about right now.
Wasif, give us an idea of how long this shakeout, this post-Brexit shakeout will last. I know it's one of the hardest questions out there, but give us an indication of the signs that we should be looking for that it's coming to an end.
Well, Mark, I don't know about the time, but I do know that it depends on what type of reaction we get from the policymakers as well as the central bankers around how do we stave this off and keep it from becoming a further contagion. You're starting to see some signs of contagion impact the currency markets and the equity markets in Europe. The idea is that if they can contain this to what's going on in Europe, maybe provide some kind of support to or speed up the process in terms of how the economic impact would be occurring to a lot of the companies and the countries involved, that's going to be the issue. So it's not a time frame issue. I think it's more of what type of policies you see coming out of the politicians as well as the central banks that'll determine if we go from what we think is, a Bear Stearns issue to a much bigger issue.
What do you think about the fixed income space, Wasif? We're seeing new lows. UK 10-year, Spanish 10-year has had its biggest decline after the election in 3 years. German 10-year, new lows. Is fixed income fixed income within the European space, sovereign space? Is it attractive on any level or not?
Well, fundamentally speaking, fixed income isn't attractive. However, it is a safe haven, and that's why you're seeing the yields continue to go lower, despite them already being so low. On a relative basis, the U.S. Bond market, especially the Treasury market, when you compare it against the European bond market, is attractive for relative value investors, and we are relative value investors as well. So we have actually had an allocation to U.S. Treasuries because of our cautionary stance on equities, and that's really helped us go through this period in our portfolios. And we think the relative difference yield between the U.S. and European bonds will continue to have flows coming into the U.S. bond market for a lot of European and even Asian investors who are still searching for yield. That still poses a very relative attractive proposition.
Wasif Latif, Head of Global Multi-Assets at USSA. Thanks for joining us. USAA, I should say. Mark.
Vonnie, as we head to the break, here's another live shot of that debate taking place in Parliament. Much more on Bloomberg Markets right ahead.
I'm moving on this as fast as we can. Obviously, the process of getting your commissioner appointed includes hearings of the European Parliament.